Police arrested innocent single dad. Single mom lawyer defended him. Justice brought them love. He was dragged away in front of his crying child. But when a single mom in a courtroom risked everything to fight the lies, no one saw the shocking ending where justice and love collided. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The autumn sun cast long shadows across Pine Grove Park as Rachel Morales watched her son Mateo chase a bright red maple leaf dancing in the breeze. Her legal briefs lay forgotten on the wooden bench beside her, her attention captured by the pure joy on her 9-year-old's face. "Mom, look!" Mateo called out, his dark curls bouncing as he jumped to catch the leaf. "I almost got it!" Rachel smiled, wrapping her cardigan tighter against the crisp afternoon air. These peaceful Sunday moments with Mateo were precious, a welcome respite from the demanding hours at her small law practice. "5 more minutes, Mijo," she called out. "Then we need to head home for dinner." Across town, in front of a modest white craftsman house with peeling paint, Daniel Carter tossed a baseball back and forth with his 8-year-old daughter, Emily. The rhythmic thump of the ball hitting their mitts echoed in the quiet neighborhood. "Nice catch, sweetie," Daniel praised as Emily snagged a high throw. Her ponytail swung with the momentum, and her face lit up at her father's words. "Did you see that, Daddy? Just like you taught me." Emily's smile revealed a missing front tooth, making Daniel's heart squeeze with tenderness. The peaceful scene shattered as 2 police cruisers suddenly screeched to a halt in front of their house, tires catching on loose gravel. Daniel froze mid-throw, the baseball dropping forgotten to the grass. "Emily, go inside," he said quietly, but she stood rooted in place, her mitt dangling from trembling fingers. 4 officers burst from their vehicles, weapons drawn. "Daniel Carter, hands where we can see them." "There must be some mistake," Daniel said, slowly raising his hands. His voice was steady, but fear clawed at his chest. "My daughter." "On the ground now." The lead officer's voice cracked like a whip. Daniel started to kneel, but before he could fully comply, 2 officers rushed him. They slammed him face first into the grass, wrenching his arms behind his back. The cold steel of handcuffs bit into his wrists. "Daddy!" Emily screamed, her voice piercing the air. "Stop hurting my daddy!" "Stay back, Emily," Daniel managed to call out, spitting out bits of grass. "Everything's going to be okay, sweetheart. Just stay there." Rachel's car rounded the corner just then, heading home from the park. Mateo pressed his face against the passenger window as they slowed, taking in the scene. "Mom, what are they doing to that man?" Mateo's voice quavered. "The little girl is crying." Rachel gripped the steering wheel tighter, her lawyer's instincts firing. The man was being roughly hauled to his feet, his plain work shirt dirty and grass-stained. The little girl, she couldn't be much older than Mateo, stood frozen on the lawn, tears streaming down her face, a baseball mitt clutched to her chest like a shield. "Daniel Carter, you're under arrest for armed robbery," one officer announced, reading from a small card. "You have the right to remain silent." Daniel's face went ash-white. "Armed robbery? This is insane. I've been home all afternoon with my daughter." The officers ignored his protests, dragging him toward the waiting police car. Emily finally broke from her frozen state, running forward. "Please don't take my daddy," she sobbed. "He didn't do anything wrong. Daddy!" One officer stepped between Emily and her father, holding her back with an outstretched arm. Daniel twisted in the officer's grip, trying to look at his daughter. "Emily, listen to me," he called out, his voice breaking. "Call Aunt Susan. She'll come stay with you. I love you, sweetheart. Everything will be okay." Rachel pulled her car to the curb, unable to simply drive past. The scene felt wrong on every level. The excessive force, the terrified child, the confused desperation in the man's voice. "Mom?" Mateo's hand found hers across the console. "That girl looks so scared." Rachel watched as Daniel Carter was shoved into the back of the police car, his head forced down roughly. Emily stood alone on the lawn, her small shoulders shaking with sobs. The baseball mitt had fallen from her hands, lying abandoned in the grass next to the forgotten ball. "Something about this doesn't feel right," Rachel whispered, squeezing Mateo's hand. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had just witnessed the beginning of something that would change many lives, including, perhaps, her own. The police cars pulled away, sirens silent, leaving only the echo of Emily's crying in their wake. The peaceful Sunday afternoon had shattered into pieces, like a mirror breaking to reveal a darker reality beneath. Rachel stood at her kitchen counter, mechanically chopping vegetables for dinner while her mind kept replaying the scene from earlier that day. The look of terror on Emily Carter's face as her father was pushed into the police car haunted her thoughts. "Mom, you're going to chop right through the cutting board," Mateo said, peering up at her from his homework spread across the kitchen table. Rachel blinked, realizing she'd been slicing the carrots with unnecessary force. "Sorry, mi amor. I'm just thinking." "About that man they arrested? Mr. Carter?" Mateo asked, twirling his pencil between his fingers. "He fixed our porch last spring, remember?" The memory hit Rachel suddenly. Daniel Carter on his knees, replacing the worn boards of their front porch after the harsh winter had warped them. She'd been newly divorced then, overwhelmed by the endless list of home repairs she couldn't afford. Daniel had noticed the dangerous state of the porch while walking past with Emily one day. "Your little boy shouldn't be running on these boards, ma'am," he'd said quietly, gesturing to where Mateo played. "I can fix it for you." When she'd tried to pay him afterward, he'd simply shaken his head. "We all need help sometimes," he'd said, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Yes, he did fix our porch," Rachel murmured, setting down her knife. "He's a good man." The phone's sharp ring cut through the kitchen's silence, making them both jump. Rachel checked the caller ID. "Pastor James." "Rachel?" The pastor's familiar voice was heavy with concern. "I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all, Pastor. Is everything all right? I'm at the jail with Daniel Carter's mother-in-law and little Emily. He's asking for legal help, and, well, I thought of you immediately." Rachel's heart thumped harder. "Me? But I mainly handle property disputes and minor civil cases. This is criminal law." "You're also the most compassionate lawyer I know," Pastor James said firmly. "Would you at least come speak with him? Tonight if possible. Emily's desperate to see her father, but she's too young to go into the visiting area." Rachel looked at Mateo, who had abandoned all pretense of doing homework and was watching her intently. "Give me 20 minutes to find someone to watch my son." "Mrs. Rodriguez next door can watch me," Mateo offered quickly. "Please go help Emily's dad, Mom." 30 minutes later, Rachel walked through the jail's security checkpoint, her heels clicking against the cold floor. In the waiting area, she found Pastor James sitting with an elderly woman who must be Daniel's mother-in-law. Emily was curled up against her grandmother's side, her small face tear-stained and tired. "Mrs. Morales?" Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "Are you going to help my daddy?" Rachel knelt down to Emily's eye level, her throat tight. "I'm going to talk to him right now, sweetheart." The visiting room was stark and institutional, with metal tables bolted to the floor and guards positioned at regular intervals. Daniel Carter sat at one of these tables, still wearing the work clothes he'd been arrested in. His shoulders were slumped, but he straightened when Rachel approached. "Mrs. Morales?" he said, surprise evident in his voice. "Pastor James called you?" Rachel sat across from him, placing her legal pad on the table. "He did. And please, call me Rachel." Daniel's eyes darted to the guard nearest them, then back to Rachel. "I didn't do this," he said quietly, intensely. "I was home with Emily all afternoon. We were playing catch in the front yard until—" His voice cracked slightly. "Tell me everything," Rachel said, uncapping her pen. "Start from the beginning." For the next 45 minutes, Daniel detailed his movements that day. His story was consistent, clear, and rang with truth. He described working on a furniture commission in his garage workshop that morning, making lunch for Emily, then spending the afternoon outside with her. "The convenience store they're saying I robbed? It's clear across town. I haven't been anywhere near there in weeks." Daniel's hands, rough from years of carpentry work, clenched into fists on the table. "But," they said, "I fit the description. Dark hair, medium build, wearing a blue shirt." He laughed bitterly. "Do you know how many men in this town fit that description?" Rachel studied him carefully. "Why do you think they focused on you specifically?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Officer Matthews, the one who arrested me. His father and my father had bad blood between them years ago. Business dispute. But surely that's not. He trailed off, uncertainty crossing his face. Rachel made a note to look into Officer Matthews' history. Daniel, I mainly handle civil cases, but if you want me to represent you, I can't afford a lawyer, Daniel interrupted, his face flushing. The furniture business has been slow, and with Emily's school expenses. Pro bono, Rachel said firmly. No charge. Daniel stared at her, his eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears. Why would you do that? Rachel thought of her own broken porch, of Daniel's quiet kindness, of Emily's tear-stained face in the waiting room. Because we all need help sometimes, she said, echoing his words from months ago. The guard called out that visiting hours were ending. Rachel gathered her notes and stood. I'll start working on your case first thing tomorrow morning. Try to get some rest. Daniel nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, he managed to say, Emily, is she okay? She's worried about you, Rachel answered honestly. But she's being very brave. Back in the waiting area, Emily jumped up as soon as she saw Rachel. Her small hands twisted the hem of her t-shirt anxiously. Did Daddy say when he's coming home? Rachel knelt down again, gently taking Emily's fidgeting hands in hers. The child's fingers were ice-cold with anxiety. I'll help your daddy, I promise. The morning sun cast long shadows across the school parking lot as Rachel's car pulled up to the curb. Mateo gathered his backpack, its worn straps decorated with superhero pins that clinked softly against each other. Have a great day, my Joe, Rachel said, reaching over to straighten his collar. Remember, Aunt Maria's picking you up today. I know, Mom. Mateo's warm brown eyes met hers. Are you going to help Emily's dad? Rachel's heart squeezed at her son's perceptiveness. I'm going to try. After watching Mateo disappear through the school's double doors, Rachel drove to the courthouse, her mind already sorting through the legal strategies she'd need. The familiar red brick building loomed ahead, its stone steps worn smooth by decades of footsteps. Inside her small office, Rachel spread the case files across her desk. The charging documents were riddled with vague descriptions and assumptions. The alleged witness statement described the robber as a tall man with dark hair, a description that could fit half the men in town. This is ridiculous, she muttered, reaching for her coffee. The ceramic mug felt warm against her palms as she studied the police report. The armed robbery had occurred at exactly 2:47 p.m. yesterday at Miller's convenience store on Oak Street. Rachel pulled out her phone and started making calls. By mid-morning, she had spoken to 3 businesses near Miller's. The final call was to May's Diner, just across town. Of course, I remember Daniel Carter, May herself answered, her voice warm through the phone. He and little Emily came in for their Sunday lunch special, just like they do every week. Such a sweet pair. Rachel's heart quickened. Mrs. Henderson, what time were they there? Oh, let me check my receipt book. There was a rustling of papers. Here it is, they paid at 2:50, 2 p.m. I remember because Emily was telling me about her science project while Daniel was counting out the tip. Rachel's fingers flew across her keyboard, documenting every detail. Would you happen to have security footage from yesterday? We sure do, honey. That new system my son installed catches everything. Within an hour, Rachel was sitting in May's Diner, watching the security footage on a small monitor in the back office. There they were, Daniel and Emily, clear as day, sitting in their usual booth at 2:45 p.m. The timestamp kept running as they ate their meal, paid their bill, and left at 2:55 p.m. It was impossible for Daniel to have been in 2 places at once. The robbery at Miller's and this footage of him at May's. The times overlapped perfectly. Rachel gathered the evidence and rushed back to the courthouse, her heels clicking against the marble floors as she made her way to the clerk's office. She filed an emergency motion for temporary release, attaching the security footage and May's sworn statement. The afternoon crawled by as she waited for Judge Martinez to review the motion. Rachel paced her office, made calls to Daniel's public defender to coordinate, and checked her watch every few minutes. Finally, at 4:30 p.m., her phone rang. The judge has granted the motion, the clerk informed her. Mr. Carter is to be released immediately, pending further investigation. Rachel gathered her things quickly, calling Daniel's elderly mother on her way to the jail. "Mrs. Carter, could you bring Emily to the county jail? I think her father's coming home tonight." The sun was setting when Rachel pulled into the jail parking lot. Mrs. Carter's old station wagon was already there, Emily bouncing anxiously on her toes beside it. The little girl's face was a mixture of hope and worry, her small hands clasped tightly together. The jail's processing took another 45 minutes. Rachel stood with Emily and Mrs. Carter, watching the heavy metal door that led to the intake area. When it finally opened with a loud buzz, Daniel emerged, still wearing the same clothes from Sunday. "Daddy!" Emily's cry echoed across the parking lot as she ran to her father. Daniel dropped to his knees, gathering his daughter into his arms. He buried his face in her hair, his shoulders shaking slightly. Rachel hung back, giving them space for their reunion. Around them, a few people had stopped to stare, their whispers carrying on the evening breeze. Daniel seemed to sense them too, his body tensing slightly as he held his daughter. When he finally stood up, still keeping Emily close to his side, he turned to Rachel. His eyes were red-rimmed but clear, filled with a gratitude that made her throat tight. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice rough. "I don't know how to—" Rachel cut him off gently. "We're only at the beginning," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. The parking lot lights flickered on around them, casting long shadows across the asphalt as the day's last light faded from the sky. Morning sunlight streamed through Rachel's kitchen window, warming the worn wooden table where Mateo sat munching his toast. The news played quietly on the small TV in the corner, its morning headlines a steady background hum. Rachel stood at the stove, flipping pancakes while her coffee grew cold beside her. "Mom," Mateo said between bites, "Tommy's dad said Mr. Carter is a bad guy. But that's not true, right?" Rachel turned off the stove and carried the last plate of pancakes to the table. She sat down across from her son, studying his worried expression. "No, mijo. It's not true. Sometimes people make wrong judgments about others, without knowing the whole story. Like when Kevin said I cheated on the math test because I got all the answers, right?" Mateo's fork pushed a piece of pancake around his plate. "Exactly like that." Rachel reached across to squeeze his hand. "Remember how your teacher stood up for you because she knew the truth?" Mateo nodded, his face brightening. "And then Kevin said sorry when he found out I just studied really hard." "That's right. And that's why what we're doing for Mr. Carter is so important. Sometimes people need someone to stand up for them when others won't believe them." The TV anchor's voice suddenly grew louder, catching Rachel's attention. "Breaking news in the Carter robbery case. Police report new evidence has been discovered." Rachel grabbed the remote and turned up the volume. Her stomach tightened as she watched the police chief hold up an evidence bag containing a handgun. "The weapon, found near the scene of the crime, has been positively matched with fingerprints belonging to Daniel Carter," the chief announced, his expression stern. "We are continuing our investigation." "Oh no," Rachel whispered, her hand covering her mouth. Something felt wrong about this, deeply wrong. Daniel's words from jail echoed in her mind. "I've never even owned a gun." Mateo looked up at her, worry creasing his young face. "Is this bad?" Rachel straightened her shoulders, forcing a calm she didn't feel. "It's just another challenge, honey. Like when we're putting together one of your big puzzles, sometimes we have to look extra carefully to see how the pieces really fit." After dropping Mateo at school, Rachel drove straight to her small law office downtown. The streets were already buzzing with the news. Outside the local diner, she spotted Mrs. Henderson, her former Sunday school teacher, arguing with Bob from the hardware store. "That Carter was always too quiet," Mrs. Henderson was saying. "You never know with the quiet ones." "Now hold on," Bob replied, his weathered face reddening. "I've known Daniel for years. He's done work all over town. Never once had a dishonest moment with him." Rachel hurried past them into her office, where her assistant Sarah was already fielding calls. "Channel 4 wants an interview," Sarah said, covering the phone's receiver. "So does the Tribune. And Daniel's neighbor, Mrs. Wu, called. She says she has security camera footage from her house that might help." Rachel dropped her briefcase on her desk. "Tell Mrs. Wu I'll be there in an hour. No comment to the media yet." She spent the morning poring over police reports, her legal pad filling with notes. The gun's discovery was too convenient, the timing too perfect. But proving it was planted would be another matter entirely. By afternoon, the town had split into clear camps. Outside the courthouse, a small group held "Justice for Carter" signs, while across the street, others demanded his arrest. Rachel watched from her office window as officers tried to keep the groups separated. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "My daughter's scared. The other kids at school. Rachel, what do we do?" She typed back quickly. "Stay calm. Trust me. We'll figure this out." But as the day wore on, the evidence mounted. The gun's serial number had been filed off. The forensics report showed multiple partial prints matching Daniel's. The prosecution was building what looked like an airtight case. Evening found Rachel at home, tucking Mateo into bed. He clutched his favorite stuffed dinosaur, eyes serious in the soft glow of his nightlight. "Mom?" he asked as she smoothed his blanket. "Are you scared?" Rachel paused, considering her answer carefully. "Sometimes doing the right thing is scary, my Joe. But that doesn't mean we stop doing it. Like when Spider-Man keeps fighting even when everyone thinks he's the bad guy?" She smiled, kissing his forehead. "Exactly like that. Now, get some sleep." Rachel had just settled onto her couch with case files spread around her when her phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. "Rachel?" His voice was tight with panic. "They're here. Police cars outside my house. They're saying they have to take me in again." Rachel's heart dropped as she heard banging in the background, followed by Emily's frightened cry. "Daniel, listen to me. Don't resist. I'm on my way. Whatever happens, we'll fight this together. Emily, she can't see this again. Rachel, The line went dead. Rachel gripped her phone, her knuckles white. The gun, the fingerprints, the timing, it all felt orchestrated, a carefully constructed trap. But why? And more importantly, how could she prove it? She looked at Mateo's closed door, knowing she'd have to wake him, knowing they had a long night ahead. Sometimes doing the right thing meant making hard choices. Sometimes it meant standing alone, against a tide of doubt and fear. But as she dialed her mother to come watch Mateo, Rachel remembered Daniel's face when he'd walked free, remembered Emily's joy at having her father back. That moment of justice, however brief, had been worth fighting for, and she would fight for it again. The county jail's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Daniel's face as Rachel sat across from him in the visitor's room. Dark circles under his eyes revealed sleepless nights, but his gentle demeanor remained unchanged. Rachel opened her leather portfolio, more out of habit than necessity. "Tell me about Emily," she said softly. "Help me understand what we're fighting for." Daniel's eyes softened at the mention of his daughter's name. He clasped his hands on the metal table between them. "She's everything to me, Miss Morales. Everything. Please, call me Rachel." She closed her portfolio. "And I'd like to hear about her mother too, if you're willing." Pain flickered across Daniel's features. He took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging slightly. "Sarah. She was the kindest person I've ever known. We met in high school, married right after. She loved working with kids, taught second grade at Mason Elementary." His voice caught. "Cancer took her when Emily was 4. It happened so fast." Rachel's heart ached as Daniel continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emily has her mother's smile, you know. Same dimples, same light in her eyes. Some days it's hard to look at her without seeing Sarah, but those are also the days I'm most grateful." "You've done an amazing job raising her alone," Rachel said, meaning every word. "I've tried. Work's been steady with the carpentry, enough to keep us comfortable. Emily's grandmother, Sarah's mom, helps when she can." He rubbed his face with both hands. "This whole mess. I can't let Emily think her daddy's a criminal. I just can't." Later that afternoon, Rachel's home buzzed with the sound of children's laughter. She stood in the doorway of her kitchen, watching as Mateo carefully explained the rules of Monopoly Junior to Emily. The little girl sat cross-legged on the floor, her dark ponytail swinging as she nodded seriously at each instruction. "And when you pass go, you get $2, Mateo declared, holding up the colorful play money. Emily's face lit up. Like when Daddy and I play real Monopoly. He always lets me be the dog piece. Rachel's chest tightened at the casual mention of Daniel. She busied herself with preparing an after-school snack, listening as the game began. The children's chatter filled the house with a warmth she hadn't realized was missing. "Mom," Mateo called out, "can Emily stay for dinner? She knows how to make the best chocolate chip cookies." "If it's okay with her grandmother," Rachel answered, already reaching for her phone. Soon the kitchen transformed into a baking workshop. Flour dusted the countertops as Emily showed Mateo how to properly cream butter and sugar. "Daddy says the secret is to be patient," she explained, her small face serious. "You can't rush good cookies." Rachel watched them work together, struck by how naturally they'd bonded. Mateo, usually quiet around new friends, chatted easily with Emily about school and their favorite books. Emily, in turn, seemed to forget her worries when absorbed in their activities. The smell of fresh cookies filled the house just as Emily's grandmother arrived to pick her up. The elderly woman's tired eyes crinkled with appreciation when Emily proudly presented her with a paper plate of still warm cookies. "Thank you for having her," Mrs. Thompson said quietly to Rachel. "It helps, having somewhere to go after school, somewhere happy." Rachel squeezed her hand. "She's welcome any time. Really." After the Thompsons left, Mateo helped clean up the kitchen, unusually thoughtful. "Mom?" he asked, wiping flour from the counter. "Emily's dad didn't do those bad things, did he?" "No, honey. I don't believe he did." "Good." Mateo nodded firmly. "Because Emily says he's the best dad ever. Like how I think you're the best mom ever." Rachel hugged her son tight, thankful he couldn't see the tears in her eyes. The pattern continued through the week. Emily would arrive after school, sometimes with homework, sometimes with baking supplies, always with a quiet hope that seemed too heavy for her young shoulders. The children's friendship deepened, their afternoon adventures ranging from building blanket forts to creating elaborate artwork for Daniel's jail cell. One evening, after both kids had fallen asleep watching a movie Emily on the couch, Mateo, in his favorite beanbag chair Rachel, sat at her desk, pulling open the bottom drawer. Behind old files and forgotten paperwork lay a small velvet box. Inside, her wedding ring caught the lamplight, the diamond that once represented so much promise now dull with memories of broken vows and tearful goodbyes. She turned the ring over in her palm, remembering the day she'd tucked it away, convinced that love wasn't meant for her anymore. Now, watching these two broken families slowly intertwining through their children's innocent friendship, something stirred in her heart. "Maybe God has a bigger plan," she whispered, her words barely audible in the quiet house. Rachel sat at her desk, surrounded by stacks of legal papers and empty coffee cups. Her eyes burned from staring at her computer screen, but determination kept her going. The more she dug into Daniel's case, the more things didn't add up. She clicked through police records, her frown deepening with each document. Officer Brad Hensley's name kept appearing, the lead investigator who'd arrested Daniel. Something about his aggressive pursuit of the case nagged at her. "Mom?" Mateo's voice startled her. He stood in the doorway of her home office, holding a sandwich. "You skipped lunch again?" Rachel's face softened. "Thank you, sweetheart." She took the sandwich, realizing she hadn't eaten since breakfast. "How did you get so thoughtful?" "Someone has to take care of you," he said with a smile that reminded her so much of his father before everything fell apart. After Mateo left, Rachel returned to her research. A breakthrough came in an old incident report from 15 years ago. Her heart raced as she read about a confrontation between Officer Hensley and Daniel's father at a local diner. The elder Carter had publicly called out Hensley for harassing teenagers at the skateboard park. The incident had led to a formal complaint and a brief suspension for Hensley. "That's it," Rachel whispered, printing the documents. She quickly drafted a motion alleging police bias, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The next morning, Rachel needed groceries. At Morton's Market, she felt the stares before she saw them. Mrs. Peterson, who'd always chatted with her about recipes, suddenly turned down another aisle. The checkout clerk barely looked at her while scanning her items. "Heard you're defending that Carter man," a voice said behind her. Rachel turned to see Betty Williams, who ran the local beauty salon. "Shame on you. We all know what that family's like. Rachel straightened her spine. In America, everyone deserves a fair trial, Betty. And Daniel Carter is innocent until proven guilty. Well, don't expect any of us to believe that, Betty sniffed, pushing her cart away. Rachel's hands shook as she loaded groceries into her car. The whispers and judgmental looks hurt more than she wanted to admit. This town had been her home since she'd married Jack and moved here 12 years ago. Even after the divorce, she'd felt accepted. Now, she drove to Trinity Methodist Church, where she found Sarah Martinez arranging flowers for Sunday service. Sarah had been her rock during the divorce, and Rachel needed a friend now more than ever. I don't know if I can do this, Rachel admitted, helping Sarah with the flowers. The whole town's turning against me. What if I'm wrong about Daniel? What if I'm letting Mateo down by taking this case? Sarah's warm brown eyes met Rachel's. Tell me something. Why did you become a lawyer? To help people. To fight for justice. And has that changed? Rachel shook her head. Then you already have your answer. Sarah touched Rachel's hand. God doesn't call us to easy paths, Rachel. He calls us to right ones. But the cost. Remember David facing Goliath? Sometimes standing up for what's right means standing alone. But you're not alone. Sarah squeezed her hand. You have faith. You have friends who believe in you, and most importantly, you have the truth on your side. Rachel wiped away a tear. Thank you, Sarah. I needed that. That evening, Rachel's kitchen filled with the smell of lasagna as she prepared dinner. Emily was coming over. She'd been spending more time with them since Daniel's rearrest, and the little girl's presence brought both joy and heartache to their home. Can I help? Emily asked, standing on tiptoes to peer at the counter. Sure, sweetie. Want to tear up the lettuce for the salad? Emily nodded eagerly. As she worked, Mateo showed her how to tear the leaves into bite-sized pieces. The two children chatted about their day at school, their easy friendship warming Rachel's heart. And then, in art class, Emily was saying, I drew a picture of Daddy's workshop. Mrs. Thompson said it was really good. Your dad builds beautiful things, Rachel said softly, remembering the careful craftsmanship of her repaired porch. He says when he gets home, he'll teach me how to make a birdhouse. Emily's voice wavered slightly. Mateo quickly jumped in. That's so cool. Maybe he can teach me too? Emily's face brightened. Yeah, we could make matching ones. Rachel watched them work together, their heads bent over the salad bowl, dark and light hair mingling as they laughed about something Mateo had whispered. The sight struck her with unexpected force. These two children, brought together by circumstances neither of them had chosen, finding friendship and joy despite their pain. This wasn't just another case anymore. This wasn't about legal motions or evidence or even justice in the abstract. This was about two families, whose lives had become interwoven in ways she never could have predicted. It was about Emily's smile when she talked about her father, about Mateo's growing protective instinct toward his new friend, about the way Daniel's quiet strength and dignity in the face of injustice had touched something deep in Rachel's own wounded heart. As she set the table for dinner, listening to the children's laughter echo through her home, Rachel felt the weight of this realization settle over her. The stakes were higher than she'd first understood. This case would change all their lives, not just Daniel's freedom, but the shape of their future, the bonds they were forming, the healing they might find together. Dinner's ready, she called, and the kids scrambled to wash their hands. Rachel looked at them, Emily with her father's gentle eyes, Mateo with his irrepressible spirit, and silently renewed her commitment to see this through, no matter the cost. This wasn't just about proving Daniel's innocence anymore. It was about fighting for the family they were all becoming. The morning sun cast long shadows across the elementary school's parking lot as Rachel guided both children toward the entrance. Emily's small hand gripped Mateo's backpack strap while he chatted about his upcoming science project. Rachel noticed the stares from other parents, their whispers barely concealed behind raised hands and coffee cups. Remember to share your lunch if Emily wants some, Rachel reminded Mateo, adjusting his collar. I packed extra cookies today. I know, Mom, Mateo said with a smile that warmed her heart. He turned to Emily. And I'll show you the best spot on the playground at recess. Emily nodded, her eyes darting nervously between the other families. Rachel knelt down to her level, smoothing the girl's slightly wrinkled dress. "You're going to have a wonderful day, sweetheart. And remember, your grandmother will pick you up after school." "Will you see my daddy today?" Emily asked quietly, her lower lip trembling slightly. "I will. I promise to tell him you're being very brave." Rachel hugged both children, ignoring the disapproving glances from nearby parents. "Off you go now. Learn lots of amazing things." As the children disappeared through the school doors, Rachel heard snippets of conversation behind her. "Can you believe she's defending him? Those poor children. I heard he's definitely guilty." Rachel straightened her shoulders and walked back to her car with measured steps. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her hurry away. The morning air felt thick with judgment, but she refused to let it affect her stride. The drive to the county jail took 20 minutes. Rachel used the time to rehearse her arguments, tapping her fingers against the steering wheel at red lights. The familiar concrete building loomed ahead, its gray walls somehow more imposing in the morning light. Inside the consultation room, Daniel sat with his hands folded on the metal table. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed his sleepless nights, but he managed a grateful smile when Rachel entered. "Emily's doing well," Rachel said, setting her briefcase down. "She and Mateo are becoming quite the team." Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you for looking after her. I know it can't be easy, with all the talk going around town." "The only talk that matters is the truth," Rachel replied, pulling out her notes. "And speaking of truth, I've been reviewing Officer Martinez's history with your family." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I didn't want to bring it up before. Thought it might make things worse." "Tell me everything," Rachel said, pen poised over her legal pad. "Even the smallest detail could help." "It goes back 15 years, Daniel began, his voice low. "Martinez and my older brother were both dating the same girl in high school. When she chose my brother, Martinez never got over it. He's had it out for our family ever since." Rachel scribbled notes. "Has he ever confronted you directly?" "Small things over the years. Parking tickets. Warning me about my truck being too close to the curb. Nothing I could prove was harassment." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "I always just tried to keep my head down, for Emily's sake." "Not anymore," Rachel said firmly. "We're going to fight this properly. All of it. The false arrest, the planted evidence, the years of harassment. Sometimes, keeping your head down only lets injustice grow stronger." Daniel studied her face. "Why are you doing all this?" "Really?" Rachel paused, considering her words carefully. "Because I believe in truth. Because Emily deserves her father. Because this town needs to face its prejudices." She met his eyes. "And because sometimes God puts us exactly where we need to be, even if we don't understand why at first." A guard knocked on the door, signaling their time was almost up. "I'll file the motion about Martinez's conflict of interest today," Rachel said, gathering her papers. "And Daniel, we're not just fighting for your freedom anymore. We're fighting for the truth this town needs to hear." The drive home felt longer than usual. Rachel could feel the weight of stairs through shop windows as she passed through downtown. Mrs. Henderson, who had always waved from her flower shop, suddenly became very busy arranging roses. The barista at the coffee shop, who knew her regular order by heart, avoided eye contact when she stopped for her afternoon coffee. But then she turned onto her street and saw her house, warm light spilling from the kitchen windows. Through the glass, she could see Mateo and Emily at the kitchen table, their homework spread out before them. Her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, was watching them while Rachel worked late. Rachel parked in the driveway and took a moment to collect herself. The sound of children's laughter drifted through the evening air, pure, unaffected by adult prejudices and small-town politics. Inside, the kitchen smelled of chocolate chip cookies and pencil shavings. Mateo was explaining multiplication tables to Emily, who giggled at his dramatic gestures. "See? When you multiply by 9, you just hold up your fingers like this," Mateo demonstrated, splaying his hands on the table. "It works every time." Emily's face lit up with understanding. "That's so much easier than counting." "How was your day?" Rachel asked, setting her briefcase down and kissing the top of Mateo's head. Emily got an A on her spelling test, Mateo announced proudly, as if it were his own achievement. And we found a caterpillar at recess. A fuzzy one, Emily added, her earlier worries momentarily forgotten in the warmth of friendship and fresh-baked cookies. Mrs. Garcia smiled knowingly at Rachel. These two have been thick as thieves all afternoon. Mateo even shared his secret cookie, dunking technique. Rachel watched the children return to their homework, their heads bent together over math problems, completely oblivious to the adult world's complications. In their innocent friendship she saw hope, not just for their families but for the whole town. The Saturday morning drive to the county jail felt different this time. Rachel glanced in the rearview mirror, watching Mateo and Emily chatting in the back seat about their favorite cartoon shows. Emily's golden pigtails bounced as she gestured animatedly, while Mateo listened with genuine interest, his dark eyes bright with attention. And then the superhero just went, whoosh! Emily spread her arms wide, nearly hitting Mateo, who ducked with a laugh. Rachel couldn't help but smile. The children's enthusiasm provided a stark contrast to their destination, a cold concrete building with iron bars and security checks. As they pulled into the visitor parking lot, Rachel took a deep breath. "Okay, kids, remember what we talked about?" She turned in her seat to face them. "No running, speak quietly, and follow all the rules," they replied in unison, having visited enough times to know the drill. The guard at the entrance, Officer Martinez, had grown familiar with their weekend visits. He gave them a kind nod as they went through security. "Good morning, Miss Morales, kids." His gentle demeanor helped ease some of the tension Rachel always felt entering the facility. The family visiting room was sparse but clean, with several round tables bolted to the floor. Natural light filtered through the high windows, creating patches of warmth on the institutional green walls. Daniel was already waiting, wearing the standard-issue orange jumpsuit that couldn't dim the warmth in his eyes when he saw them. "Daddy!" Emily rushed forward for a careful hug, mindful of the rules about contact. Daniel's face softened as he held his daughter close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Hey, Princess, being good for Miss Rachel?" "Yes, and Mateo's teaching me chess," Emily beamed. Daniel looked up at Mateo, who hung back slightly. "Chess, huh? That's pretty impressive." Rachel watched as Mateo stepped forward, shoulders straightening under Daniel's attention. "Mom got me a set last Christmas," he explained. "I could teach you too, Mr. Carter." "I'd like that," Daniel smiled, then gestured to the table. "But first, I've got something to show you both." From a small paper bag of approved items, Daniel pulled out several pieces of wood, smooth and pale. The guards had carefully inspected each piece, making sure they were too dull to be dangerous. Rachel sat down, observing as Daniel arranged them on the table. "The workshop supervisor let me keep these scraps," he explained, his carpenter's hands moving with practiced ease. "Thought I could show you how to make simple animals." Both children leaned forward, fascinated. Rachel watched as Daniel demonstrated how to identify shapes within the wood. A rabbit in this piece, a bear in that one. His voice grew animated as he shared his craft, showing Mateo how to hold the wood safely and imagine the creature waiting to emerge. "See this grain line?" Daniel guided Mateo's smaller hand along the wood. "That could be the bear's back. Nature's already done half the work for us." Mateo's face lit up with understanding. "I see it." He looked at Daniel with admiration. "Could you teach me more next time?" "Any time you visit, buddy." Daniel's voice carried a gentle authority that made Rachel's heart ache. She'd seen how Mateo yearned for male guidance since the divorce, and here was Daniel, naturally filling that role despite his circumstances. While the children became absorbed in their wooden menagerie, Rachel and Daniel's conversation drifted to quieter topics. They sat close, their voices low. "How's he handling the divorce?" Daniel asked, nodding toward Mateo. Rachel sighed, watching her son. "Better than I expected, but he misses having a father figure, his dad." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He's not very present." Daniel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Emily still asks about her mom sometimes. Hard to explain heaven to an 8-year-old. How do you do it?" Rachel asked softly. "Keep going, I mean. Some days I can barely manage, and I'm not." She gestured at their surroundings. "One day at a time," Daniel replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Some days, the only thing keeping me going is knowing Emily needs me. Other days." His eyes met Rachel's, holding a warmth that made her breath catch. "Other days I get reminded there are still good people in the world." Rachel felt heat rise to her cheeks, and she looked down at her hands. The simple silver band she still wore on her right hand caught the light, but somehow its weight felt different now. When she looked up again, Daniel was watching her with an expression that made her heart flutter. The rest of the visit passed too quickly. Emily showed her father her latest art project, while Mateo proudly demonstrated a chess move he'd learned. Rachel found herself stealing glances at Daniel, noticing the gentle way he listened to both children, the strength in his shoulders despite his situation, the quiet dignity he maintained. As their time drew to a close, Daniel helped the children gather their wooden treasures. "Take good care of these," he told them. "Maybe next time we can make some more." The goodbye was harder than usual. Emily hugged her father tight, and even Mateo gave Daniel a shy wave that carried more meaning than words. Rachel hung back, suddenly uncertain how to say goodbye. Daniel solved the problem by reaching out and briefly squeezing her hand. "Thank you," he said simply. But his eyes said more. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Rachel sat at her desk in the soft lamplight. Her journal lay open before her, and she twirled her pen thoughtfully. The day's events played through her mind, the way Daniel's hands had guided Mateo's, the sound of Emily's laughter, the warm look in Daniel's eyes when he'd thanked her. She began to write, her pen moving slowly across the page. "This feels like a family, even if it isn't mine yet." Rachel paused, looking at the words she'd just written. They scared her a little, but they also felt true, in a way that made her heart both ache and hope. Rachel's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard, her coffee long since gone cold. The small desk lamp cast a warm glow in her home office as the clock ticked past midnight. Her eyes burned from staring at the screen. But she couldn't stop now, not when she was this close. Come on," she muttered, scrolling through police reports from neighboring counties. A pattern was emerging, one she'd almost missed. Her sister Amy had taken Mateo for the night, understanding the importance of Rachel's work. "Get some rest," Amy had said earlier, but Rachel knew sleep wouldn't come until she followed this lead. The pieces started falling into place. 3 pawn shops in nearby towns had reported items matching those stolen from the convenience store. Each time, the same man had brought them in, a drifter with a long criminal record named Marcus Webb. Rachel's heart raced as she pulled up his mugshot. The description matched perfectly: tall, dark hair, prominent scar on his left cheek. She'd found him. Dawn was breaking when she finally gathered her evidence into a neat folder. After a quick shower and change of clothes, she headed to the county jail, clutching a stack of papers that could change everything. Daniel looked tired when the guards brought him to the visitor's room, but his eyes brightened at the sight of her. "Rachel, it's early." "I couldn't wait." She spread the documents on the table between them. "Look at this, Daniel, the real robber. I found him." Daniel leaned forward, his handcuffed wrists resting on the metal table as he studied the papers. "Marcus Webb. He's been pawning items from the robbery across 3 counties. Rachel pointed to the receipts. "The timing matches perfectly. And look at his record. Armed robbery, assault. Everything matches the MO of the convenience store robbery." Daniel's shoulders straightened, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time in weeks. "This could clear me?" "It's more than enough for reasonable doubt, and once we track him down." Rachel reached across the table, touching his arm gently. "We're going to get you out of here, Daniel. For good this time." He swallowed hard, looking down at her hand on his arm. "I've been trying not to hope too much. For Emily's sake." "I know." Rachel's voice softened. "But maybe it's time to start thinking about the future. What happens after you're free?" Daniel's eyes met hers, and something warm passed between them. "I've been thinking about that more than I should," he admitted quietly. Rachel felt her cheeks flush. The kids need something to look forward to. Emily, especially. "How is she?" "Getting stronger every day." She and Mateo are inseparable now. Rachel smiled. He's taken on the role of protective big brother, even though they're only a year apart. Daniel's expression softened. She needs that, after her mother. He paused, collecting himself. I never thought she'd have someone like that in her life again. Or someone like you in Mateo's life, Rachel said softly. The guard's voice interrupted their moment. Time's up! Rachel gathered her papers quickly. I'm meeting with the DA this afternoon. This evidence changes everything, Daniel. He nodded, standing up. Thank you, Rachel, for not giving up on me. Never, she promised. Later that afternoon, after a promising meeting with the district attorney, Rachel picked up Mateo from her sister's house. He was bubbling with excitement about a plan he and Emily had concocted. Can we have a picnic, Mom? Emily says we should celebrate. Rachel laughed, touched by the children's optimism. You know what? That's exactly what we need. They stopped by Emily's grandmother's house to pick her up, and soon Rachel's small backyard was transformed into a celebration space. The kids spread out a checkered blanket on the grass, carefully arranging sandwich triangles and fruit on paper plates. Emily wore her favorite yellow sundress, her face glowing with joy as she arranged cookies on a plastic tray. Daddy's coming home soon, isn't he? She asked Rachel, hope shining in her eyes. Rachel knelt beside her, smoothing the girl's hair. We're getting closer every day, sweetie, I promise. Mateo grabbed Emily's hand. Come on, let's put the flowers in the middle. They had picked dandelions from the yard, arranging them in one of Rachel's old jelly jars with the solemnity of professional florists. Rachel watched them work together, her heart full. The sound of their laughter floated through the warm afternoon air, drowning out the whispers of doubt that had plagued them all for so long. For the first time since this ordeal began, joy felt stronger than fear. Emily stood back, surveying their handiwork. It's perfect, just like when Daddy and I used to have picnics. And now you have us too, Mateo said simply, putting his arm around her shoulders. Rachel blinked back tears as she watched them. The picnic blanket might have been worn, the flowers might have been weeds, but in that moment their celebration felt more genuine than any fancy party could have been. She took out her phone and snapped a picture of the children together, knowing Daniel would want to see this moment of happiness. The sight of Mateo and Emily, heads bent together over their carefully arranged feast, told a story of hope more powerful than any legal argument she could make. Okay, Rachel said, sitting down on the blanket. Who's ready for the best victory picnic ever? Me! Both children shouted, raising their hands and giggling. As they shared sandwiches and cookies in the warm afternoon sun, their laughter rang out across the yard. For these precious hours, they weren't a lawyer, a prisoner's daughter, and a child of divorce. They were simply a family, celebrating the promise of better days ahead. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Rachel's small law office as she unlocked the door. Her heels clicked against the wooden floor as she stepped inside, juggling her briefcase and a fresh cup of coffee. Something caught her eye, a white piece of paper on the floor, clearly slipped under her door overnight. Rachel set her things down and picked up the paper, her heart skipping a beat as she read the crude message scrawled in black marker. Drop the Carter case or else. Her hands trembled slightly as she sank into her office chair. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder, tucking the threatening note inside. Taking a deep breath, she tried to steady her nerves. The office phone rang, making her jump. It was just Mrs. Henderson asking about her will. Rachel answered professionally, but her mind kept drifting to the threatening note. By lunchtime, 3 more notes had appeared, each more menacing than the last. One had been left on her car windshield, another pushed through the mail slot, and the third tucked under her office door while she was in court. Just ignore them, she muttered to herself, but her voice wavered. She thought of Mateo at school, suddenly worried about his safety. Should she pull him out? No, she couldn't let fear control her life. When she picked Mateo up from school that afternoon, she plastered on a smile. How was your day, sweetheart? Great! We're learning about the solar system, Mateo beamed, climbing into the car. Can we visit Mr. Carter today? Rachel checked her watch. Actually, yes. I have a meeting scheduled with him. Would you like to do your homework in the visiting room? At the jail, Mateo settled into a corner with his backpack, while Rachel and Daniel sat at a small table. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she pulled out the threatening notes. Daniel's face darkened as he read them. "Rachel, this is serious." His voice was low, concerned. "They're trying to scare you off." "I know," Rachel said, keeping her voice steady. "But I won't let them win. These people, they're dangerous." Daniel's hands were clenched on the table. "Think about Mateo. Maybe you should." "Don't," Rachel interrupted softly. "Don't ask me to give up." "Not you." Daniel's eyes met hers, filled with worry. "I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you or Mateo because of me." Rachel glanced at her son, peacefully working on his math homework. "Nothing will happen. I'm taking precautions. I've informed the police, installed security cameras at home and the office." "The police?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "The same ones who planted evidence against me?" "I went to the state police," Rachel clarified. "And I have friends in the FBI. They're aware of the situation." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. I care about you both too much to see you hurt." Rachel's heart warmed at his words, despite the circumstances. "We care about you too. That's why we can't back down now. We're close to proving your innocence, Daniel. These threats, they're proof we're getting somewhere." Mateo looked up from his homework and waved. Daniel managed a smile and waved back. "He's a good kid," he said softly. "Just like Emily. Yes, he island." Rachel watched her son for a moment. "And that's exactly why I have to keep fighting. What kind of example would I be setting if I let bullies and threats stop me from doing what's right?" The visit ended too soon. As they drove home, Mateo chatted about his day, blissfully unaware of his mother's concerns. Rachel kept checking the rearview mirror, making sure no one was following them. At home, she double-checked all the locks and windows. Mateo didn't question the new security routine. He seemed to accept it as just another change in their lives, like having Emily over for dinner or visiting Daniel at the jail. After dinner, Rachel helped Mateo with his remaining homework. They sat at the kitchen table, working through his spelling words, while she kept one eye on the security camera feed displayed on her tablet. "Mom," Mateo said suddenly, "are you scared?" Rachel paused, considering her answer carefully. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means doing what's right, even when you are scared." Mateo nodded thoughtfully. "Like when I had to give that speech at school?" "Exactly like that." Rachel smiled, touched by his simple understanding. Later, after Mateo had brushed his teeth and changed into his favorite space-themed pajamas, Rachel tucked him into bed. She sat on the edge of his bed, running her hand through his dark hair. "Can we pray for Mr. Carter?" Mateo asked sleepily. "Of course we can, sweetheart." Rachel knelt beside his bed, taking his small hand in hers. The moonlight filtered through his window, casting gentle shadows across his innocent face. She closed her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dear God, please protect us all. Daniel, Emily, Mateo, and me. Give us strength to face whatever comes tomorrow. Help us fight for what's right, even when we're afraid. And please, Lord, help the truth come to light. Amen." "Amen." Mateo echoed softly, already drifting off to sleep. Rachel stayed kneeling by his bed, watching his peaceful face, drawing strength from his innocent trust in her. She would not let fear win. She would not let injustice prevail. No matter what threats came, she would see this through. For Daniel, for Emily, for Mateo, and for justice itself. Rachel's footsteps echoed through the courthouse hallway as she hurried toward Judge Thompson's chambers, clutching a thick manila envelope. Inside was the security footage she'd finally obtained from the convenience store across from where the drifter had been staying. Her heart raced with anticipation. Back in her office, she spread the evidence across her desk. Time-stamped photos, witness statements, and most importantly, the security footage that showed the drifter entering the store at the exact time of the robbery. His distinctive tattoo was clearly visible on his forearm, the same tattoo mentioned in the original police report but conveniently forgotten when they arrested Daniel. "Got you," Rachel whispered, organizing the documents into a neat pile. She reached for her phone to call Daniel's pastor, Reverend Martinez, who had been coordinating support from the church community. "This is wonderful news, Rachel," the Reverend said warmly. "Actually, we're planning a community barbecue this Saturday. Perfect timing to lift everyone's spirits." The following Saturday afternoon, Rachel helped Mateo carry their contribution of homemade potato salad across the church lawn. The air was thick with the smell of grilling hamburgers and the sound of children laughing. Emily spotted them immediately and ran over, her pigtails bouncing. "Mateo! Rachel!" She wrapped her arms around Rachel's waist. "Daddy's by the grill with Reverend Martinez." Rachel's eyes found Daniel, who was wearing a Kiss the Cook apron over his jeans and t-shirt, expertly flipping burgers. He looked different here, more relaxed, his shoulders less tense, a genuine smile on his face as he chatted with the Reverend. "Mom, can Emily and I play on the swings?" Mateo asked, already halfway there with Emily. "Go ahead, sweetie. Stay where I can see you." Rachel made her way to the grill, nodding and smiling at church members who, for the first time in months, weren't averting their eyes or whispering behind their hands. The evidence against the drifter had spread quickly through their small town, and the tide of public opinion was finally turning. "Need any help?" she asked, approaching Daniel. He turned, and his face lit up. "Hey there. Want to learn the secret to perfect burgers?" "I'm all ears," Rachel said, stepping closer. Daniel handed her the spatula, positioning himself behind her. "The trick is to only flip them once," he explained, his breath warm near her ear as he guided her hand. "And never ever press down on them. That's how you lose all the juices." Rachel was acutely aware of his presence, the gentle pressure of his hands on hers, the way her heart fluttered when he chuckled at her tentative flip of a burger. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this kind of connection with someone. "You're a natural," he said softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment the bustling barbecue faded away. There was something in Daniel's gaze. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper, something that made Rachel's cheeks flush. The moment was broken by Reverend Martinez announcing it was time to eat. The church lawn transformed into an impromptu dining room, with families spread out on blankets and camping chairs. Rachel sat with Daniel, the kids, and several church members who eagerly included them in their conversation. As the afternoon faded into evening, someone started a bonfire. The children begged to stay longer, so Rachel retrieved sleeping bags from her car. She'd learned to always be prepared for impromptu adventures with Mateo. The fire cast dancing shadows across the lawn as families gradually said their goodbyes. Emily and Mateo, exhausted from playing, snuggled into their sleeping bags near the fire. Rachel tucked them in, smoothing Emily's hair back from her forehead just as she did with Mateo. When she stood up, she saw Daniel watching her from across the fire. The flames illuminated his face, highlighting the warmth in his eyes and the gentle curve of his smile. Rachel felt her heart skip a beat as their gazes locked. In that moment, without words, something passed between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing steadily, quietly, like a flower reaching for the Sunday. She smiled back at him, allowing herself to embrace the warmth that spread through her chest. The firelight danced between them, and in its glow, Rachel saw not just the man she'd been fighting to defend, but someone who had somehow become essential to her happiness. The crackling fire, the peaceful breathing of their sleeping children, and the soft chirping of crickets created a perfect moment of contentment. Neither of them spoke, letting the unspoken understanding hover in the air between them, as natural and beautiful as the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky above. The morning sun cast long shadows through Rachel's office window as she sorted through case files on her desk. Her coffee had gone cold, forgotten in the rush of preparation for the upcoming trial. Pictures of Mateo and Emily, playing at the barbecue, decorated her desk, bringing a soft smile to her face despite her exhaustion. The sharp ring of her phone cut through the quiet. "Rachel Morales speaking," she answered, tucking the receiver between her ear and shoulder as she continued organizing papers. "Miss Morales." Officer Martinez's voice was tense. "I thought you should know. Jimmy Torres, your witness? He's gone." Rachel's hands froze mid-motion. "What do you mean gone?" "His apartment's empty. Cleared out sometime last night. Left no forwarding address." The stack of papers slipped from Rachel's fingers, scattering across her desk. Jimmy Torres was their star witness, the one who'd seen the drifter pawning stolen goods. Without him, their case. "Have you filed a missing persons report?" Rachel's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Nothing to file. Looks voluntary. Place was cleaned out proper, rent paid up. Classic spooked witness scenario." Rachel's throat tightened. "I need to make some calls." She spent the next 3 hours calling every contact she had, shelters, clinics, other lawyers. No one had seen Jimmy. By noon, her desk was littered with coffee cups and crumpled sticky notes. The evidence they had wasn't enough without his testimony. The security footage, the pawn shop records, it all needed Jimmy to tie it together. Her office door creaked open. "Miss Morales?" Her assistant Sarah's face was pale. "There are officers here. They have a warrant for Mr. Carter's arrest." Rachel's stomach dropped. She'd known this was coming, but the reality still hit her like a physical blow. Following Sarah out, she found 2 uniformed officers in the waiting room. "We're heading to pick him up now," one said, not unkindly. "Thought you should know." Rachel nodded numbly. "Let me call him first. Please, give him that dignity at least." The officers exchanged looks, then nodded. Rachel's hands shook as she dialed Daniel's number. "Rachel?" His voice was warm, trusting. It made what she had to say even harder. "Daniel." She swallowed hard. "The police are coming. Jimmy's gone. Without his testimony." She couldn't finish. The silence on the other end stretched for several heartbeats. "I understand," he finally said, his voice hollow. "Emily's at school. Could you—" "I'll pick her up. I promise. Thank you." His voice cracked slightly. "Rachel, I know," she whispered. "I'm not giving up. We'll fight this." But they both knew the odds. Without Jimmy's testimony, the prosecution's case looked solid. The planted gun, the circumstantial evidence, the officer's testimony, it would all stand unchallenged. Rachel watched from her office window as police cars pulled away from the courthouse, heading toward Daniel's house. Her reflection stared back at her, looking as defeated as she felt. The rest of the day passed in a blur. She picked up both Emily and Mateo from school, trying to explain to a devastated Emily why her daddy had to go away again. The little girl's sobs tore at Rachel's heart. That evening, after feeding the children and putting them to bed in the guest room, Rachel finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of failure. She trudged to her bedroom, her body heavy with exhaustion and defeat. The bed caught her as she collapsed, face buried in her pillow to muffle her sobs. All her promises, all her fighting, and she'd failed them. Failed Daniel, failed Emily, failed justice itself. She didn't hear the soft padding of feet across her carpet, didn't notice Mateo's presence until she felt the gentle weight of a blanket being draped across her shoulders. Her son's small act of comfort only made her cry harder, but somehow it also gave her the tiniest spark of strength. Tomorrow she would get up and fight again. But tonight she let herself break under the weight of it all. Mateo's quiet footsteps retreated, leaving Rachel alone with her tears and the crushing weight of a justice system that seemed determined to punish an innocent man. Rachel stared at the mess of cereal splattered across her kitchen floor, her patience wearing thinner than the paper towels she used to clean it up. The morning had started badly when she discovered she'd forgotten to wash Mateo's soccer uniform for practice. Now this. "Mateo, please be more careful." Her voice came out sharper than intended. "I don't have time for this today." Her 9-year-old son froze, spoon halfway to his mouth, milk dripping onto the table. His dark eyes widened with hurt, and Rachel immediately felt her heart sink. She hadn't meant to snap at him. "I'm sorry, Mama," he whispered, shoulders slumping. Rachel dropped the soaked paper towels and moved to wrap her arms around him. "No, mi amor, I'm the one who's sorry. Mommy's just very tired." Mateo leaned into her embrace. "Because of Mr. Carter's case?" "Yes." Rachel pressed a kiss to his forehead. "But that's not your fault. I shouldn't take it out on you." The kitchen clock ticked loudly, reminding her they were running late. Again. Case files were spread across the counter, mixed with Mateo's homework and Emily's art supplies from yesterday's visit. Rachel's world had become a juggling act of legal briefs and lunchboxes, court appearances, and soccer practice. "Go grab your backpack, okay? Aunt Maria will pick you up from school today." As Mateo scampered off, Rachel caught her reflection in the window. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually neat hair was escaping its ponytail. She looked as exhausted as she felt. The drive to school was quiet, Mateo still subdued from her outburst. Rachel reached over to squeeze his hand at a red light. "I love you, you know that?" "I know." He managed a small smile. "I love you too." After dropping him off, Rachel headed straight to the county jail. The guards knew her by now, nodding as she passed through security. In the visitor's room, Daniel looked worse than she felt, his face gaunt, his usually warm eyes dulled by despair. "I've been thinking," he said before she could even sit down. "Maybe I should take the plea deal." Rachel's breath caught. "Daniel, no, 5 years instead of 20. His voice was hollow. "Emily would still have a father when I get out. She wouldn't have to testify." "You're innocent." Rachel leaned forward, gripping the edge of the metal table. "We can't let them win like this." "Can't we?" Daniel's laugh was bitter. "The witness is gone. The gun has my prints. Emily cries herself to sleep every night, her grandmother told me." He rubbed his face with shaking hands. "I'm tired of fighting, Rachel. So tired. Look at me." Rachel waited until he met her eyes. "Remember when you fixed my porch last year? You told me about teaching Emily to build birdhouses, how proud she was when she finished her first one." Daniel's expression softened at the memory. "That's the father she needs, the one who teaches her to create, to persist, to believe in herself." Rachel reached across the table, not caring about the no-contact rule. Her fingers brushed his. "Not one who teaches her to give up when things get hard. I'm trying to protect her. By pleading guilty to a crime you didn't commit? By letting her grow up believing her father is a criminal?" Rachel shook her head fiercely. "That's not protection, Daniel. That's surrender." A guard cleared his throat, and Rachel withdrew her hand. Daniel stared at the spot where their fingers had touched. "I don't know if I'm strong enough anymore," he whispered. "Then lean on me." Rachel's voice was gentle but firm. "That's what I'm here for. We're in this together. You, me, Emily, Mateo. We're like..." She paused, almost saying family, but catching herself. "We're a team." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Emily asked me yesterday if we could have another barbecue like last weekend." "We will." Rachel injected every ounce of conviction she could muster into those 2 words. "When you're free, when the truth comes out." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I have to be." Rachel gathered her files, standing as the guards signaled the end of visiting hours. "Promise me you won't take that plea deal. Promise me you'll keep fighting." Daniel looked up at her, and for a moment she glimpsed the spark that had first drawn her to his case, the quiet strength beneath his gentle nature. "I promise." Back at her office, Rachel closed the door and sank to her knees. The weight of Daniel's trust, Emily's future, Mateo's need for stability, it all pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. "God," she whispered, clasping her hands together. "Show me the way. Don't let me fail them." Tears slipped down her cheeks, falling onto her wrinkled suit jacket. She didn't bother wiping them away. Here, in the privacy of her office, she could finally let her guard down. The strong, confident attorney could give way to the scared single mother who wondered if she was in way over her head. "Please," she prayed again, her voice barely audible. "Don't let me fail them." Rachel drummed her fingers on her steering wheel, staring at the rundown motel on the outskirts of town. Her contact had said the witness, Manuel Ortiz, was staying here, too scared to return to his apartment after the threats began. The neon vacancy sign buzzed and flickered in the late afternoon Sunday. She checked her phone one last time, rereading the text from her court clerk friend. "Room 114, be careful." Taking a deep breath, Rachel stepped out of her car. The cracked asphalt radiated heat, and somewhere a dog barked. She approached room 114, her heels clicking against the concrete, and knocked softly. No answer. She knocked again, this time calling out in Spanish. "Señor Ortiz? Me llamo Rachel Morales. Soy abogada." There was a shuffle inside, then silence. Rachel continued in Spanish, keeping her voice gentle. "I know you're scared. I'm here to help. Please, just 5 minutes." The door opened a crack, revealing a young man with tired eyes. He couldn't have been more than 25. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered in accented English. "Neither should you," Rachel replied. "This is no way to live." Manuel glanced nervously over her shoulder. Rachel understood his fear. She'd seen it before in her immigration cases. "May I come in? Just to talk?" After a long moment, he nodded and stepped back. The motel room was sparse but neat. A small duffel bag sat ready by the door. Rachel's heart ached, recognizing the preparedness of someone ready to run at a moment's notice. "The police," Manuel said, wringing his hands. "They said if I testified they would call ICE. I have family here, children." Rachel sat at the small table, motioning for him to join her. "I know about the threats, but I also know you have legal status." I checked. "They're lying to you, Manuel." His eyes widened. "But Officer Hensley is corrupt," Rachel finished firmly. "And I can prove it, with your help." She pulled out some papers from her briefcase. "I have connections with immigrant advocacy groups. They can provide protection, legal support, whatever you need." Manuel sank into the chair across from her. "The night of the robbery," he said slowly. "I was cleaning the store. I saw everything." Rachel leaned forward. "Tell me." For the next hour, Manuel detailed what he'd witnessed: the real robber, the threatening visits from Officer Hensley, the planted evidence. Rachel recorded everything, her hands shaking with a mixture of anger and hope. As she was preparing to leave, a police cruiser pulled into the parking lot. Rachel's heart jumped when she recognized Officer Hensley stepping out. "Manuel," she whispered urgently, "pack your bag, now." They slipped out the back door just as heavy footsteps approached the front. Rachel led Manuel to her car, keeping to the shadows. As they pulled away, she saw Hensley's frustrated face in her rearview mirror. The drive to her office was tense. Rachel made several unnecessary turns, ensuring they weren't followed. Manuel clutched his duffel bag, looking smaller than ever. In her office, Rachel worked quickly, calling her contacts, arranging protection. "You'll stay with a friend of mine tonight?" she explained, handing Manuel a business card. "She's an immigration lawyer. Tomorrow, we'll file your official statement." "What if they come after my family?" Manuel asked. Rachel met his eyes steadily. "We'll protect them too. I promise." After ensuring Manuel was safely with her colleague, Rachel drove home, exhaustion settling deep in her bones. The house was quiet. Her sister had already put Mateo to bed. She found a note on the kitchen counter. "He waited up as long as he could. Love you both." Rachel stepped onto her front porch, sinking into the old wooden swing. The night air was heavy with jasmine, and crickets chirped in the darkness. Her phone buzzed, a call from the jail. "Rachel." Daniel's voice was rough with emotion. "The guard said you left a message about the witness." "We found him," she said softly. "He's safe, and he's going to testify." There was a long pause. When Daniel spoke again, his voice cracked. "Thank you for believing in me." Rachel closed her eyes, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. In the quiet darkness of her porch, with Mateo sleeping safely inside and Daniel's gratitude warming her heart, she finally allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, justice would prevail. The call ended, but Rachel stayed on the porch a while longer, listening to the night sounds and holding on to hope. The morning sun filtered through the courthouse's tall windows, casting long shadows across the packed gallery. Rachel stood at the prosecution table, her navy blazer crisp despite the humid air. Her heart thundered in her chest, but her voice remained steady as she addressed Judge Martinez. "Your Honor, the defense calls Manuel Ortiz to the stand." A collective murmur rippled through the courtroom as Manuel, a slight man in his early 30s wearing a borrowed suit that hung loose on his frame, made his way to the witness stand. His shoulders were hunched, but his eyes held determination as he was sworn in. Rachel approached him slowly, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "Mr. Ortiz, Can you tell the court where you were on the evening of March 15th? Manuel leaned toward the microphone, his accent thick but clear. I was working late shift at the Quick Stop on Mason Street. I was stocking shelves in the back when I heard shouting. From the corner of her eye, Rachel noticed Officer Burke shifting uncomfortably in his seat. She continued, "What happened next?" I peek around corner of aisle. See two men, not Mr. Carter. Manuel pointed at Daniel. Different men. One tall with tattoo on neck, other shorter with red baseball cap. They have gun, demanding money from register. The prosecutor, Tom Wheeler, shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. This witness was not on the original list. Your Honor, Rachel interrupted. The prosecution knew about this witness. In fact, she pulled out a document from her briefcase. I have here signed statements from 3 other convenience store workers stating that Officer Burke threatened to report them to immigration if they came forward about what they saw that night. The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. Judge Martinez banged his gavel. Order! Order in the court! Rachel pressed on, her voice growing stronger. Mr. Ortiz, why didn't you come forward sooner? Manuel's hands twisted in his lap. Officer Burke, he come to my apartment. Say if I talk, he make sure I get deported. I have family here, American-born children. I was scared. Officer Burke's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Rachel produced more documents. Your Honor, I have here security footage from the apartment complex showing Officer Burke making this threatening visit. I also have documentation proving Mr. Ortiz has legal resident status and was fully within his rights to testify. She turned to face the jury, her voice clear and passionate. This case isn't just about a robbery. It's about abuse of power. It's about a man who was targeted because of prejudice, while the real criminals walked free. It's about a father who almost lost everything because someone with a badge decided his life didn't matter. Rachel moved closer to the jury box, her eyes meeting each juror's gaze. Daniel Carter spent his life building things, homes, furniture, community. He raised his daughter alone after losing his wife, never asking for help or handouts. But when he needed justice most, the system failed him. Until today. She gestured to Manuel. This man risked everything to tell the truth. He showed more courage than those sworn to protect and serve, because he understood what really matters. Not power, not prejudice, but justice. The prosecutor tried to discredit Manuel's testimony during cross-examination, but the truth had already taken root. When Officer Burke was called to explain the apartment footage, his stammering denials only reinforced the defense's case. As Rachel delivered her closing argument, she felt the energy in the courtroom shift. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've seen the evidence. You've heard Mr. Ortiz's testimony. You've witnessed the lengths some would go to hide the truth. Now you have a choice: to let injustice stand, or to show this community that truth matters, that every person deserves fair treatment under the law, regardless of their background. She paused, looking at Daniel, then at Emily, sitting with Mateo in the gallery. Mr. Carter's daughter has watched her father suffer through false accusations and imprisonment. She's learned a hard lesson about how the world can be unfair. Today, you have the power to teach her a different lesson: that justice can prevail, that truth will come to light, and that good people will stand up for what's right. When Rachel returned to her seat beside Daniel, she could feel the tension in the courtroom. The jury filed out, their faces unreadable. Daniel turned to her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He silently mouthed, "No matter what, thank you." Rachel reached under the table and squeezed his hand, both of them watching as the last juror disappeared through the deliberation room door. The weight of months of struggle, fear, and hope hung in the air between them as they waited for justice to prevail. The courtroom fell silent as the jury filed back in. Rachel's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. Next to her, Daniel sat perfectly still, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. The only movement was the slight trembling of his shoulders. Judge Martinez's voice cut through the tension. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The jury forewoman stood, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. "We have, Your Honor." Rachel reached over and squeezed Daniel's arm. Behind them, Emily clutched Mateo's hand in the front row, both children barely breathing. On the charge of armed robbery? How do you find? The forewoman's voice rang clear and strong. We find the defendant, Daniel Carter, not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Rachel let out a sob of relief as Daniel's shoulders slumped, years of tension releasing in a single moment. But the forewoman wasn't finished. Your Honor, she continued, the jury would also like to formally recommend an investigation into Officer Brad Hensley's conduct during this case. More gasps filled the room. Officer Hensley, sitting in the gallery, jumped to his feet. This is ridiculous! You can't— Officer Hensley, Judge Martinez's gavel cracked like thunder. You will sit down or be removed. He turned to the jury. The court thanks you for your service and takes your recommendation seriously. The bailiff approached Officer Hensley, who had turned pale. 2 other officers appeared, and Rachel watched as they escorted their colleague from the courtroom. The whispers grew louder as people realized what was happening. The corruption was being exposed right before their eyes. Daddy! Emily's voice cut through the chaos. She darted past the gate separating the gallery from the court floor, her brown curls flying behind her. Daniel turned just in time to catch his daughter as she launched herself into his arms. My baby girl, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He lifted her up, holding her close as tears streamed down both their faces. Rachel felt a tug on her sleeve. Mateo stood there, his eyes shining. You did it, Mom! You really did it! The pride in her son's voice broke something inside her. Rachel pulled Mateo into a tight hug, her tears falling freely now. When she looked up, Daniel was watching her over Emily's shoulder. He gently set Emily down and took a step toward Rachel. Without hesitation, he wrapped his arms around her, pulling both her and Mateo into a tight embrace. The courtroom erupted in applause, but Rachel barely heard it. All she could focus on was the warmth of Daniel's arms and the sound of his voice as he whispered, "Thank you for saving my life." Emily wiggled her way into the group hug, and for a moment, the 4 of them stood there, holding each other as if they'd never let go. The next few hours passed in a blur of paperwork, congratulations, and tears. Daniel's pastor arrived to offer prayers of thanksgiving. Former critics came forward to apologize. Reporters clamored for statements, but Rachel shepherded her little group through the courthouse halls and out into the bright afternoon sunshine. I can't believe it's really over, Daniel said as they walked down the courthouse steps. He hadn't let go of Emily's hand since the verdict. Believe it, Rachel replied, watching as Mateo showed Emily a caterpillar he'd found crawling on the handrail. You're free. Daniel looked at her, his eyes soft. Thanks to you. Can we have dinner together? Emily asked suddenly, looking up at her father with hopeful eyes. All of us? Please, Mom, Mateo added, giving Rachel his best pleading look. Rachel and Daniel exchanged glances, both smiling. I think that's a wonderful idea, Rachel said. My house? I make a mean spaghetti and meatballs. Hours later they sat around Rachel's kitchen table, the smell of garlic bread filling the air. Mateo and Emily were giggling over their plates, playing some sort of game with their garlic bread that involved building tiny houses. Rachel watched them, her heart full. The late evening sun streamed through the kitchen window, painting everything in warm, golden light. For the first time in months, there was no tension in Daniel's shoulders as he reached for the Parmesan cheese. No worry lines creased his forehead as he helped Emily twirl her spaghetti. More juice, please, Emily chirped, holding up her glass. What do we say? Daniel reminded gently. More juice, please, Miss Rachel? Rachel smiled, reaching for the apple juice. Of course, sweetie. As she poured, she caught Daniel watching her, a soft expression on his face. Their eyes met over Emily's head, and something warm and tender passed between them. This was more than just a celebration dinner. This was their first real moment of peace. Their first chance to simply be together without fear or worry, shadowing every interaction. Mateo launched into a story about his science project, his hands waving animatedly as he described the solar system model he was building. Emily listened with rapt attention, her fork forgotten halfway to her mouth. Daniel asked questions at just the right moments, drawing out more details and making Mateo beam with pride. Rachel sat back in her chair, taking in the scene before her. The table was messy with spilled juice and scattered crumbs. Spaghetti sauce had somehow ended up on Mateo's sleeve. Emily's garlic bread house had collapsed into a buttery pile. And it was perfect. Absolutely perfect. The late afternoon sun painted Rachel's backyard in shades of gold as she watched Mateo and Emily from the kitchen window. They were building what looked like a fort out of cardboard boxes Daniel had brought over from his workshop. Her heart swelled at their laughter, a sound that had become wonderfully common in recent weeks. "They're quite the team now," Daniel said softly, coming to stand beside her at the window. His shoulder brushed against hers, and Rachel felt that familiar flutter in her stomach. "Just like their parents," she replied, then blushed at her own boldness. Daniel smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and made the tiny wrinkles at their corners deepen. "I never properly thanked you, Rachel. Not just for saving me, but for believing in me when nobody else did." Rachel turned to face him, leaning against the counter. "You don't need to thank me. I was just doing what was right. We both know you did more than that." His voice was gentle. "You protected Emily when I couldn't. You gave Mateo and me a chance to bond. You brought light back into our lives." Outside, Mateo was showing Emily how to reinforce their cardboard walls with duct tape. The two children worked together with the easy comfort of siblings, something that warmed both parents' hearts. "Would you like to join me for coffee after church on Sunday?" Daniel asked, his words careful and measured. "Just us?" Rachel's heart skipped a beat. They'd been dancing around this moment for weeks, both afraid to disturb the delicate balance they'd found. "I'd love that," she answered simply. The next Sunday, they sat in a quiet corner of the local cafe, their hands wrapped around warm mugs. The morning service had been especially moving, with their pastor speaking about forgiveness and new beginnings. "Did you see Mrs. Henderson today?" Rachel asked, stirring her coffee. "She actually smiled at us. That's a first since, well, everything." Daniel nodded. "Things are changing. Slowly, but they're changing. The same people who wouldn't look me in the eye a few months ago are starting to wave hello again. The truth has a way of healing things," Rachel said. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. "Speaking of healing, Mateo asked if he could help you in your workshop next weekend." Daniel's face lit up. "I'd love that. He's got a real talent for detail work. Yesterday he was telling me all about this birdhouse he wants to build." "He never had anyone to do those things with before," Rachel admitted softly. "His father? Well, he wasn't interested in spending time with him that way." "Their loss is my gain," Daniel said, his voice warm. "Mateo's an amazing kid, Rachel. You've done an incredible job raising him." They spent the afternoon walking through the town park, talking about everything and nothing. Parents who once hurried their children away now stopped to chat. The whispers that followed them were different now, wondering when they'd make it official rather than questioning Daniel's character. At the church's Wednesday night dinner the following week, Rachel and Daniel volunteered to help in the kitchen together. She watched as he taught some of the younger children how to properly set the tables, his patience evident in every gentle instruction. "He's a good man, Mrs. Martinez," one of the elderly church members, said to Rachel as they chopped vegetables side by side. "We were wrong about him, and many of us are ashamed of how quick we were to judge." Rachel smiled, watching Daniel demonstrate the difference between a salad fork and a dinner fork to a giggling group of kids. "He is a good man, one of the best I've ever known." The next Saturday, Daniel organized a workshop day for the church youth group. Rachel arrived with Mateo and Emily to find him surrounded by eager children, carefully showing them how to sand wood properly. He looked up when they entered, and his whole face softened. "Perfect timing," he called out. "We need some expert quality control inspectors." Emily ran to her father for a hug, while Mateo examined the work tables with serious interest. Rachel watched as Daniel guided both children through the basics of woodworking, his hands gentle as he helped them hold the tools correctly. "Miss Rachel," one of the younger girls tugged at her sleeve, "are you and Mr. Carter going to get married?" Rachel felt her cheeks warm. "We're just good friends, sweetie." "But you look at each other like my mommy and daddy do," the girl insisted with the brutal honesty of childhood. Before Rachel could respond, the pastor's wife called everyone to the snack table. As they gathered around plates of cookies and lemonade, Rachel couldn't help but notice how natural it felt. The four of them together, sharing smiles and inside jokes, moving around each other with easy familiarity. The following weekend, the town held its annual summer festival in the park. Strings of lights twinkled in the trees as families gathered for food, games, and music. Rachel watched as Mateo and Emily ran from booth to booth, their faces painted like butterflies. "Remember last year's festival?" Daniel asked quietly as they walked together. "I didn't even come. I was afraid of how people would treat Emily." Rachel nodded, understanding the weight of the change. "And now look at her. She's got half the town wrapped around her finger." They stopped at the ring toss booth, where Daniel won a stuffed penguin for Emily. The booth operator, who had once been one of his harshest critics, clapped him on the shoulder with genuine warmth. As the evening wore on, the band began playing slower songs. Couples swayed on the makeshift dance floor, and children chased fireflies in the growing dusk. Mateo and Emily had joined a game of tag with other kids, their laughter carrying across the park. "This is how it should be," Rachel said softly, watching their children play. "Everyone together, no walls between us." "It took some breaking down," Daniel replied, "but those walls needed to fall." He paused, then took a deep breath. "Rachel, these past few weeks, they've meant everything to me. Not just having my freedom back, but having you and Mateo in our lives." Rachel felt tears prick at her eyes. "You've given us so much too, Daniel. You've shown Mateo what a father should be. You've made us feel whole again." The band struck up a gentle melody as the fireflies danced around them. Daniel reached for Rachel's hand, his touch warm and sure. As they stood together in the soft evening light, surrounded by the community that had learned to embrace them, he leaned close. "We're stronger together," he whispered, and Rachel knew in her heart that it was true. Sunlight danced across the lake's surface, creating tiny diamonds that sparkled with each gentle ripple. Rachel spread out the red-checkered blanket on a grassy patch near the water's edge, while Daniel unpacked their picnic basket. The warm summer breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers and the distant sound of children's laughter. "Mom, watch this!" Mateo called out, standing ankle-deep in the clear water. He skipped a smooth stone across the surface, making it bounce 4 times before sinking. "That's amazing, sweetheart," Rachel beamed, settling down on the blanket. Her heart filled with joy as she watched Emily wade in beside him, her sundress hiked up to her knees. "Can you teach me how to do that?" Emily asked Mateo, her eyes wide with wonder. "Sure. First, you have to find the perfect stone," Mateo began explaining, leading Emily along the shoreline in search of skipping stones. Daniel sat down beside Rachel, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Remember when we first met?" he asked softly. "That Sunday afternoon feels like a lifetime ago." Rachel nodded, watching the children splash through the shallow water. "I never imagined that watching your arrest would lead to." She gestured at the scene before them. "All of this." "I was so broken that day," Daniel admitted, his voice quiet but steady. "Seeing Emily cry as they put me in that police car, it was worse than any pain I'd felt since losing Sarah." Rachel reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. The simple gesture carried the weight of shared understanding, of countless hours spent fighting together for truth and justice. "The funny thing is," she said, "I thought I was just taking another case, but God had bigger plans, didn't he?" Daniel squeezed her hand. "He certainly did. You know what amazes me most? How Mateo and Emily connected right from the start, like they knew something we didn't." They watched as Mateo demonstrated the proper wrist motion for stone skipping, Emily mimicking his movements with intense concentration. When her stone skipped twice, she jumped up and down, squealing with delight. "Did you see that? Did you see?" Emily called out to them. "We saw, Princess," Daniel called back, his face glowing with pride. "Great job." Rachel leaned back on her elbows, letting the sun warm her face. "I was so scared of failing, Daniel. Not just the case, but—" She paused, gathering her thoughts. "After my divorce, I built these walls, convinced myself that Mateo and I were better off alone." "I know exactly what you mean," Daniel nodded. "After Sarah died, I thought that was it for me. that Emily and I would just have to make our way through life, just the two of us. The children had moved on to building a small dam with rocks and sticks, working together as if they'd been siblings all their lives. Mateo's protective nature showed in how he helped Emily balance on the slippery stones, while her creativity sparked new ideas for their project. "Look at them now," Rachel smiled, reaching into the picnic basket for sandwiches. "Mateo has changed so much since meeting you both. He smiles more, laughs more freely. Having you in his life, Daniel, having a father figure who's present and caring, it's been healing for him." Daniel unwrapped his sandwich slowly, his eyes misty. "And Emily, she needed a mother's touch so badly. The way you help her with homework, braid her hair, just listen to her stories, you've given her back something I thought was lost forever." Rachel felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes. "When did you know?" she asked softly. "That this was more than just a lawyer defending her client?" Daniel chuckled, brushing a crumb from his shirt. "Honestly, it was that day you brought Emily and Mateo to visit me in jail. Watching you with them, seeing how naturally you all fit together, I felt hope for the first time in years. For me, it was during all those late nights working on your case," Rachel admitted. "Every piece of evidence I uncovered, every motion I filed, it stopped being about winning a case. It became about fighting for our future, even if I wasn't ready to admit it then." A splash and burst of laughter drew their attention back to the water. Mateo had accidentally stepped into a deeper spot, soaking his shorts. Instead of being upset, he and Emily were doubled over with giggles. "Mom! Dad!" Emily called out, the word "dad" still holding special weight after nearly losing him. "Can we go swimming? Please?" Rachel and Daniel exchanged glances, both noting how Emily had called out to both of them naturally. "Good thing we packed their swimsuits," Rachel said, reaching for the beach bag. As the children changed behind nearby trees, Daniel turned to Rachel. "You know, when the verdict came in, I was so focused on being free that I didn't realize something important." "What's that?" Rachel asked, helping him fold the sandwich wrappers. "That freedom wasn't just about clearing my name, it was about being free to love again, to trust again." He paused, watching as Mateo and Emily emerged in their swimsuits, racing toward the water. To build something new and beautiful from something that started so painfully. Rachel felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the summer Sunday. "From justice came love," she whispered, echoing words Daniel had spoken during one of their jail visits. "Look at me, Dad!" Emily shouted, jumping off a low rock into the clear water. "Careful, sweetie!" Both Rachel and Daniel called out simultaneously, then laughed at their unified response. Mateo splashed around his sister, his face bright with joy. "Mom, come in with us. The water's perfect." Rachel looked down at her sundress, then at Daniel. "What do you say? Should we join them?" Before he could answer, drops of water sprayed over them as both children began splashing in their direction. "Oh, that's it!" Daniel laughed, jumping to his feet and pulling Rachel up with him. "You asked for it." The sun continued its lazy descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The lake rippled with 4 sets of splashes now, filled with the sounds of family. Not 2 separate families anymore, but one united by something stronger than blood. Love born from adversity, trust forged in fire, and hope that bloomed in the darkest of times. As the first stars began to peek through the darkening sky, Daniel wrapped an arm around Rachel's shoulders. "From justice came love," he whispered, his voice full of wonder and gratitude. Rachel leaned into his embrace, smiling as she watched their children playing in the fading light, their laughter echoing across the peaceful lake. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Rachel Morales, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.